Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to First Person, the show where we meet the most interesting people in IT and learn from them what makes them tick by focusing only on their firsts. I'm your host, Matt Egan, asking you to enjoy, like, and subscribe wherever you find us. And if you're an interesting person in IT, do let us know. You might be the next first person. The next voice you will hear now will be today's guest. He is Arno Skilperud. Arno is definitely one of the most interesting people in IT. He's currently Director of Global Architecture and Digital Innovation at the Heineken Company, and we are delighted to have him as a guest on First Person. So, Arno, welcome. And first up, what is the first thing people should know about you?
That's a great question, and thanks for having me today. I think I can talk about what I do or what I've done in the past, but maybe the first thing that people should know about me is that I believe coding is magic, and that coding is a form of poetry.
Oh,
In coding, you write in symbols and in syntax, and from that you create a whole new world, a new you create apps or websites or games or financial systems or new algorithms. So to me, that is, creating a whole new world with just words.
it's
And
pretty
that is
magical, isn't it? Yeah, I sometimes have to take a step back and think about that because you are through symbols and words, like creating something, in a way that like it's almost if I watch my children using Minecraft or something like that, right? It's almost like instinctive to humans to do that. It is an art form, but I don't think we necessarily think about that often enough.
I don't think so, but it is what really inspires me. And creating something from nothing, a blank
Yeah,
screen,
yeah.
and that sense of possibility that is really what inspires me.
Very cool. Okay, wonderful. What a great start. So, Arno, section one of our little show, we like to call First Things First. And this is where we like to get to know about our guest by understanding some of their first times. And I'm actually really looking forward to this based on your first comments here. But let's focus in on your first job in IT. Tell us about, how you got started in this industry.
Yeah, it was back in 1995 that I started with a small software company with just a handful of people. And one of the first project I was assigned to was with a bank here back in the Netherlands. But I was part of a team that did a design implementation of Windows infrastructure. And soon after that, I moved into a department that's responsible for designing and building global trading floors for the bank. So that's an environment where everything needs to be high performant, resilient, real time. So that's really where I learned the IT job, working under pressure, building systems that we couldn't afford to fail.
Yeah, pretty exciting. And remembering back to that time, you were doing lots of things for the first time, I presume, right? I mean, I remember a little bit before that, but as a high school student, visiting the stock exchange in London, and it was all guys in bright coloured, and it was guys in bright coloured jackets, like arguing with each other. And within 5 years, it was online digital training platforms. To your point.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah, yeah. So that was a time that was super emerging. I learned a lot, things for the first time. I think everybody was learning things for the first time,
Yeah.
and that to me was so energizing.
Energizing and, to your previous point about creativity, that's pretty cool, right? Because you're building things. Would that be kind of the first time that you sort of you got in there and you thought, "Yeah, this is the kind of thing I want to do, like, with my life?"
I think so. Yeah, that really clicked for me at that time. Had the level of innovation, the level of
Mhm.
energy, also working, with all sorts of colleagues from different parts of the world. That's really what I thought. This is maybe the industry for me to
Yeah.
work in.
And how did you get to that point? I'm interested in because, we started here where you're working writing code, I presume, for a software company, but, like, there's a point, between you getting the inspiration to build something and then having the technical skills to go and get that job. So was that something that you studied in college or at school or, how did you get into that whole world?
Mm, It's very different, actually. I studied physics, so bit of different background, and so I did research what is it, anti-glare coatings on TV screens with Philips. I worked at a university on, what they call the scanning tunnel microscope, where you create images at atomic level of surfaces. So very different. But already at time I was, using computer models and writing computer code to help in the analysis. But after my study, I explored several job opportunities, and that's how I rolled into in the IT world. Like I said, that world at that time, that industry was booming.
Yeah.
I was surrounded by incredible people, so much creativity, so much energy. I was learning, everybody was learning. And yeah, that's like I said, that's what I believe was the world for me to work in.
Yeah, no, it's so cool, and it's amazing how often when we meet people in this environment, like, it isn't a straightforward, "Yes, I wanted to work in IT, therefore I pursued a job in IT." The number of interesting, creative people who have some other related background, but it's a different background, and to your point, I think, like, the inspiration is to do with the creativity, the opportunity, the ambition, the people you're working with. So that sounds really cool, but, the path from where you were there to where you are now with this incredible senior creative job, one of the world's, large iconic organizations. Like, talk to me about that, right? How do you go from that first exciting burst of your career and sort of develop and move through the pathways you've moved?
Um, Yeah, to me, important part of the work, when we work at the trading floor, building, designing solutions that are resilient, high performant, that's a small step to architecture. And to me, today's world, we are fully dependent on digital solutions, whether we work for the bank or the government, consumer goods company like I'm working in today. As a society, we are dependent on these digital solutions, and they need to be well architected, well designed. And to me, that is something that ticks for me a lot of boxes. As something that I like to be part of, and constantly strive for that improvement. So throughout my career, worked as architect on consultancy and outsourcing models in finance and now consumer goods.
So you found that that was kind of where you could have the most influence that you wanted to have, I guess, kind of thing. And I mean, like, I look from the outside and think that architecture role must be the most kind of satisfying, right? Because you're putting the building blocks in place to create the great kind of creations. Um,
Absolutely, yeah. To me, it is, but of course, you ask an architect for that.
well, but that's interesting, right? Because at some point you go from, you know, like the way you described your initial work, um, uh, without necessarily having any experience in the industry or even knowing what the industry is, right? And you gravitate towards this piece. So I'm wondering if there were any kind of bosses or mentors along the way who helped you kind of with your progression, and if so, what did you learn from those first great bosses, kind of thing?
Mm. Um, I've worked with many amazing and super intelligent and experienced people. Um, but I think my first truly great boss, he stood out for having an incredible radar for spotting problems early.
Right.
If there was a technical problem at a project, he would feel it at an early moment, and he would step in and ask the right questions and steer it back. When we had a major outage, he didn't just treat it as an incident. The team will solve it. He'd call the team together after the first incident and perform a root cause analysis and turn it into a learning
Yeah.
moment. If someone was personally struggling, he would notice that and sit down at the desk and had a chat and support. So that radar for spotting early problems, that is something that I really admire in that person.
Yeah.
And that's really where I learned that great leadership isn't just about technical expertise. It's also about awareness, about timing, about creating a culture of high performance and creating an environment where people feel safe and feel supported.
Yeah, really important, right? And I think there's a level of ego a level of kind of empathetic ego that allows you to like run towards the problem and see it as an opportunity rather than kind of trying to sort of skirt past it. Which again is
Right.
interesting how often that comes up in these conversations, that great leaders, great managers actually are the ones who embrace the challenges and the problems and the issues both at a personal level and at a structural level, because it's by solving those problems that you get better, right? And you learn. And I think it says something about the empathetic nature of a leader that they're able, comfortable to do that rather than having to always be seen to succeed. Which is useful for us, Arno, because the second section of our conversation today we like to call first fails. Because we're not only here for the good stuff, right? We want to be empathetic leaders and learn from our mistakes. So if you wouldn't mind, I think I'd be interested to know, in all that context, what was the first big mistake you can remember making, and I wonder if you learned anything from that.
Mm, getting a bit personal now. Um, I think, yeah, well, one of the big mistakes I still remember in my career is we were working on a project. I was architect on that project, and we had some fundamental compatibility issues with another system. And I believed that could be fixed, and I kept pushing forward and trying to make it work. And really, on hindsight, I should have stepped back much sooner and acknowledged the flaws, and have gone a different direction. And it really taught me how powerful a lesson. And sometimes the smartest move is not to push harder, but had to let it go, to reassess, and to choose another path. And well, I guess at the end, that shift in mindset had made me a stronger architect and also more collaborative in areas.
But it's a hard lesson to learn, I think. And I would say personally, in my professional career, it's a lesson I have to learn continually, right? Because we're emotional creatures. And so like that, like the prize being there and thinking, if only we can just get this done, like great. It is, I find it personally really hard to be the person that goes, hang on, stop, let's put a spade in the ground, take a step back. Maybe we need to rethink this kind of at this point. It's a difficult thing to do emotionally sometimes, I think.
Yeah, it is because especially there's a lot of stakes into it. There's existing investments, teams working on those projects. And so to call it to a halt, that is a difficult decision.
Yeah, it's like I, I'm not sure how true this is now, but they used to say in the 90s about Japanese car manufacture that if anything was wrong on the production line, the uh, the protocol was that everything stopped and everyone focused on solving the minor problem, and like and whatever time was lost was considered kind of time gained. And I always thought that's a great principle, but I don't want to be the guy who's stopping the whole factory because like one ball bearing's not working right or something like that. So it's a great lesson to learn, but I think it's a lesson you have to continually relearn, in my experience, at least. And I think one of the things about that, another question we like to ask is, and maybe and the answer might be this has never happened, but one of the questions we like to ask is was there a first time you realized that something you knew might not actually be right? Something that you'd kind of operated by, believed in. Sometimes these things get challenged and you learn more as you develop.
I'm not sure whether it's the first time, but more and more realization that stuck with me is that the original promise of cloud-based solution, as being flexible, as being pay-per-use, as being cheap, doesn't hold true
No.
all the time. And so I used to believe that cloud was inherently cheaper and more agile by design, but what you now see is that model has evolved, and today the cloud providers often push for long-term commitments and for pricing that is tied to revenue of our company or the perceived value rather than the actual
Yeah.
usage of systems. So that shift. And that challenged my assumption and made me rethink how we architect
Yeah.
for cost efficiency, for agility. And that's also to me a good reminder that widely accepted paradigms as cloud and that can change.
Yeah.
And we need to stay, curious, critical,
Definitely.
and that is part of being a good architect.
It sort of feels like, instinctively that it should be true, right? That cloud should always be cheaper and more efficient. And yet, and we reported on this recently, we're seeing like really large numbers of repatriation from cloud to on-prem. And some of that's driven by, which is one of the reasons why being an architect must be super exciting right now. Some of that's driven by the need to be AI ready and to be building organizations for the future. And some of it's driven by, I mean, I always thought this, right? Why do FinOps departments exist if cloud is is always, the most efficient option? And I do feel we're in a really kind of interesting period from an infrastructure perspective, because every organization has to have these same thought processes, right? Which is, how do we build the infrastructure for a future that we maybe don't fully understand, like, because we know it's going to require like scalability of technology to support AI. So that must be quite interesting in your role, I would guess.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah. And of course, with many solutions, we do use cloud solutions, but and also we are very deliberately making choice when we build
Mhm.
in-house solution, and actually spinning up quite large teams that start developing solutions ourselves, and
Yeah.
which is proven to be cheaper, better fit for our needs.
Yeah,
Uh,
but a really good example, to your point, of something that I think, a paradigm that we all bought into to some extent. And it doesn't mean that we were wrong necessarily. It's just that the world moves on and changes, and economics and business practices are such that the profit mostly drives things. And I do, which is, we're not saying cloud isn't a huge part of the future. We're just saying that assumption that it was the entire future, like, actually has turned out not to be true, kind of thing.
Correct.
Okay, amazing. I feel like we could talk technical for the longest period of time, but I also feel like we're getting to know you as a person, Arno, and that intrigues me. So we're going to move on to section 3, which is our quick fire firsts. We want to get to know you beyond your professional veneer. So we're going to find out about the real person using our patented first person random question generator. So could you please, Arno, pick a number between 1 and 13?
Pick number 5.
Number 5. That is your first home. Like, what can you tell us about your first home, Arno?
First home.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
I was
You had an answer before for something else, so we can take a pause, and I can. Uh,
no, that's the home where I was born, or the first home that I bought.
Whatever comes to mind.
No, I was born in a small village in the Netherlands, close to Rotterdam. Um, my uh, my parents bought it. I think they for the equivalent of less than €10,000 though,
Right. That really.
uh, which was which was a detached house. And I remember there is a picture of me sitting in the kitchen overlooking, the countryside.
Yeah.
So that's the first home,
Yeah.
but
Amazing.
also one of my first memories.
I mean, so many things that brings up, right? Like, I have a similar kind of memory of like looking out of the back door of my parents' house that I grew up in. Um, but also, you bring to mind the fact that, yes, my parents also, I think my parents spent less than £1,000 on the house
Oh well, no.
I grew up in. And yeah, that's not something I want to think about too closely, and it's definitely something my children shouldn't shouldn't think about to any extent. Amazing. Could you please pick another number between 1 and 13?
uh, Pick number 9.
Number 9. What is, oh, I like this question. What is the first thing you would buy if you won the lottery?
I won a lottery. Um, I think I would take my wife out for an amazing dinner.
That's gonna be quite an amazing dinner with your.
I'm not spending all that money of the lottery, but I think it's good to celebrate the moment.
Yeah.
That's probably what I'm gonna do.
Would you still, because I think about this sometimes. I don't do the lottery, right? So it's not an issue that I'm gonna have. But like, I think I'd still work, right? I think I still would want to do good work. I'm not sure I would do exactly everything I was doing now. But I guess, if money was no object, would you still want to do some of the things that you do professionally now? Would life change radically, do you think?
I think I would still work, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, yeah. My current job is very demanding and we make long hours. So
Yeah.
if I could balance that just a little
Yeah.
bit better, then yes.
Yeah.
But I think I would still work, yes.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like so in my world of writing or creating content, it's like it's exactly the same thing, right? I'd really like to drill down to the things that I love to do and maybe jettison some of the hours and some of the more administrative or stressful elements. I'm guessing if you're an architect, you want to build things, right? Like that's the cool part of the job.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Arno. I feel like we'll get to know you pretty well at this point. Um, and I'd feel like what will be really useful as we move into section four, our final section will be, which we call first and final thoughts, is to really understand, some of your experiences and how that can help our viewers and listeners. So, Arno, what would be the first piece of advice you would give to somebody who is just starting out now?
Mm, well, my advice is that this industry is so full of opportunities that it has been for the past many years, and certainly now in time of AI. But the key is to find out what really excites you. And so pay attention to what gives you energy, not just what looks good on paper. Stay curious, keep learning. Don't be afraid to reinvent yourself along the way.
Yeah,
Um, and if you ever find yourself in a role or an environment that drains more energy than it inspires you, then take that as a signal and look around, explore your options,
yeah,
and don't be afraid to move on. And throughout my career, I've made a number of changes because I felt at that moment in time it was the right step to do after 5 or 7 or 8 years, 9 years, and make a step in another company, another environment, another challenge, other type of focus, other technologies. Um, and I have also seen people, which got stuck to the company and complain about the situation. And, yeah, just move on if you don't like it. And there's so many opportunities.
yeah. No, or at least to your point earlier, at least look, right? Look around and think about what you want to do. I mean, there's so many really wise things in there, Arno, that I sort of wish you'd have been saying to me when I was starting out many years ago. We are fortunate to be living and working through an industrial revolution, right? So the way things look like today may not be the way things are tomorrow. The career path might change. So you said a lot of things that really resonated with me. Stay curious, like understand what gives you energy. And of course, it's not always possible to just change jobs like that, but like thinking about that in that context will allow you, I think, to stay motivated and stay creative. Maybe is that how you kind of view the way your career has been?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
So it's a good skill to develop, and I think it's really important for people to hear that. And throughout that career, I guess you've done many kind of successful and amazing things. What would be the first project or achievement that you would want to tell people about from an architect perspective? What's your masterpiece? Would you say?
And well, the first thing I did is something when I bought a computer when I was like 12 years old and then programmed something in BASIC.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and that's probably back to your first question that you asked. And that magic of creating something out of nothing, that felt like magic. But I wouldn't call that my masterpiece.
that's a
Yeah,
pretty cool thing to have done, I think, and that's yeah, and you'd be amazed the number of people we talk to who have a similar origin story, right? Like when they were a child, they copied out some code from a magazine, or they like borrowed the school computer, and I love those stories because it really gets to the heart of what it is that inspires people. But okay, maybe that's not your greatest masterpiece, but it's a very important part of the journey. But what is?
well, I think my masterpiece hopefully yet to come,
Yeah.
and the work that's currently doing in the current role at Heineken, and we do a complete business and technology transformation, and changing our enterprise application landscape, heavily invest in the value of data through AI, which requires a lot of architecture attention.
Yeah.
Of course, that entire transformation have been at the very start of it and involved with it now. So we're in the middle of the journey, but I hope the biggest part of that masterpiece is yet to come.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And again, that's an answer that we often hear from smart, successful people, right? It's we're proud of every achievement we've had, but we want to move on to the next thing. And I do think successful people are often the people, you described previously how it's about understanding what gives you energy, looking around you and thinking about where you want to be rather than kind of just slavishly following a career path. But I also think that curiosity to be excited by technology and build the next thing is pretty cool, right? And from an architect's perspective, there are a lot of challenges right now because we speak to a lot of business leaders who are like, we're going to transform our business using data and AI. And it's like, cool, but you need an architecture to build the infrastructure to support that. And I'm not sure that's always understood, but I mean, you must feel that there's a huge opportunity out there, like to build these great projects with architecture right now.
Yeah, and that's really also the next thing. So, it wouldn't surprise you that also in our organization, I truly believe that the impact of AI will be massive and disruptive in the coming years. I think if you compare it to previous big trends, cloud, mobile, um, internet before, had massive impact, and I believe the impact of AI is equally big or bigger, and will go even faster compared to these other big trends in the past. I think it's difficult for all of us to imagine what the impact is and what the potential is, and on something like agentic AI. And we have a number of bots that execute processes and an orchestration bot that holds it together and feeds it back into a human being who feeds the bot and trains and learns it. And it has massive potential for the organization to drive efficiencies, to also to work with less people or very different roles to what we have today.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, that is maybe the biggest transformation that I've seen and that is yet to come.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree, and I feel like sometimes, like you mentioned this earlier, it's important to take a step back and think about that. You mentioned multiple kind of disruptions and transformations, and each one seems to get quicker. And AI is exponential, right? It's going to increase these things, and some of the things you spoke about there are kind of, to my mind and in my world, it's about remaining focused on the mission and understanding how you can transform like operations and strategies to support the mission using these tools and kind of being open-minded, right? Because we don't know what the end point is. But I feel if we've got the mission and the values to support, then it's super exciting to kind of follow this wild ride, I guess. But you have to have that growth mindset to understand that what we did yesterday may not be the thing we're doing tomorrow, kind of thing.
No. And at the same time, I try to prepare for it, be ready for it. Like you said, people think sometimes, let's jump on the AI wagon, but there's a lot of foundations that needs to be in place around platforms, around data, around how we do knowledge management in the organization. Uh,
This is why we need excellent architects, right? Because again, like business leaders will have visions, but the IT strategy has to be the strategy, um, or it's not going to work, right? The pieces all have to fit together. So it's a very exciting time, but I guess also a challenging time, and that's what makes it interesting, really. So Arno, this has been wonderful, but I would like to ask our only non-first question, which is, do you have any final thoughts that you would like to share with our audience as we close down our conversation?
mm. My final thought is that we should always remember that speed is one divided by complexity.
Yeah,
And I think sometimes we over-architect to make the world too complex. We should think about how when we design something, when we architect something, when we create something, how will it look like a year from now, and keep it as simple as it can be, but not simpler, so that we can move at speed.
yeah.
And speed is extremely important.
Yeah. My boss often likes to talk about velocity, speed with purpose, kind of thing. And I think they both speak back to the idea of,
Yeah.
and you opened up with this talking about, the excitement of creativity. And I think there and how, it's art really to create something from nothing, and the greatest art is simple, right? It is um, not easier necessarily, but it's possible to create an incredibly complex technical thing, but the thing that lasts for the longest time and the thing that has the most value and is the most artistic tends to be a simple thing. Simplicity is not easy. Simple is hard, but simple is good and future proof, right? Yeah. Well, my thanks to Arno Skilprod, and thank you for watching or listening to this episode of First Person, the show where we meet the most interesting people in IT and learn from them what makes them tick by focusing only on their firsts. I have been your host, Matt Egan, asking you to enjoy, like, and subscribe wherever you find us. And if you are an interesting person in IT, like Arno, please let us know, and you may be our next first person. So from Arno and me, goodbye.